Okay, hello, we're live. Welcome to Princess Steps Week 3, and the topic tonight is heart rate. So welcome to some of the new people that this is their first night here for this fall clinic. We're excited to have you. We're excited to get started with heart rate night because while it is a little bit chaotic, the leaders are dialed in. They've done this before. It's a very, very, very important part of the whole Princess Steps program, it being effort. So John's going to be the guest speaker tonight, and he knocks it out of the park, always has. I have never gotten tired of hearing him, and I think the leaders can, I can speak confidently for them because, so many people, and some of you have heard me say this, and it's worth saying again. You start a program, and you get going, and you're enthusiastic, and you're excited, and then you start to feel like yuck. You feel like yuck, and you lose your motivation. You lose your motivation, and you end up quitting. And most of the time, the reason why you feel like yuck is because you're trying to do too much, too soon, too fast. You don't realize that you're going too fast. And so that's why we put this objectivity and science into the overall program. You've heard us talk about conversation pace. So tonight we're going to put some science into it. We're literally going to stop and take the heart rate. And the reason why it's a little chaotic is because the leaders are going to tell you with about 10 or 15 seconds warning. They're going to say, okay, in about 15 seconds or 12 seconds or whatever the leader says, we're going to stop and take our heart rate. We're going to do a heart rate check. So that means you just have to be ready. Whether it's your carotid artery or your brachial, you're going to stop, but they're not going to give you very much time for good reason. They're going to give you about 1 or 2 seconds. So what you can expect is they're going to say, okay, stop, and then you stop, and then they're going to say, count. Or they might say now, or they might say go, but they're going to say something, and then you start counting. And they're only going to give you 6 seconds, exactly 6 seconds. And you're going to count the beats, or count your pulse, how many beats you get within that 6 seconds. And then they're going to say, okay, let's keep going. And then you're going to start walking again or running again, whichever. And when they have, when there's a bigger group, it just is a little chaotic because they got to kind of, herd you like cats. And so why it's so important, because if you stop for longer than about 1 or 2 seconds trying to figure out what you're doing or where your heart rate is, it's going to start coming down that fast. So then you're going to get an erroneous reading or measurement of what your effort was. And that's why, the heart rate slips that you all have, you'll see 60 to 65%. 60 to 65% is where you want to be for your warm-up. Okay? You don't want a red line. There's nobody here training to qualify for the Olympic trials, as I've said before. So you don't need to be in the red. So what that says is if you're above 65% and you're still in the warm-up part, then what do you got to do? Slow down. Okay? Now let's say you've already done the warm-up, and the leader said, okay, we're going to pick the pace up, and you're still down at 60%. What does that tell you? Right. You got it. Pick your pace up. Okay? So that goes without saying that if you're in a group to where you feel like you're struggling, this stopping and taking your heart rate check is going to, again, put objectivity to the whole overall process. Okay, so if you're working too hard, maybe that's an indication you need to back off a little bit. So right now, I'm going to have everybody get their heart rate. Count. Stop. Okay, let's try it again. Everybody get your heart rate. I'm going to give you a little more this time because I'm going by the 0 up on that clock right there. Okay, everybody got their heart rate. Ready? Count. Stop. Okay, now stand up. Just kind of march in place like this. Breathe. Get excited. Yep. Okay, get your heart rate. Ready? Count. Stop. You can sit down again. Okay? Probably it was a little faster the second time, right? Okay? The other thing I'm going to say is that I didn't do name tags today because I just didn't get to them. It was kind of a busy day, and I don't want them to melt anyway. So if you're having a conversation with the leaders, and I'm going to ask the leaders this too, ask the person's name. If there's a concern that you're going to let me know about on the report card that you text to me this time, ask the person's name. It's like, well, there was this person, but what's her name? Oh, I don't remember. So don't be shy. Tell them your name. And I'll try to get the name tags again next week because the leaders always say, Susan, can we just have name tags every week? Like, I'm sorry, I didn't get the name tags. Okay. Are there any burning questions for me right now before John starts? Okay. If I forgot something, I'll bring it back at the end.
Okay. Hey. So you give me 2 weeks in a row. You got me last week for shoes. Shoes go on your feet. Heart takes care of everything else. Okay. See this guy, gal, person, it. So that's what we were looking for. We want a happy heart, right? Put that there for the screen. Smiling, moving blood around your body, okay? Everybody has a heart, and it beats blood, right? If you don't, you wouldn't be sitting here right now. So main thing with your heart and moving that circulating the blood, circulating the water, the oxygen, everything that flows through our bodies. Things leave the heart going through arteries, right? And blood goes out to all your working muscles. When you're walking, when you're running, muscles are working a little bit harder, so the demand is a little bit higher. All right, when you're sitting, resting, sleeping, your heart rate naturally is a lot lower. Okay, how many people actually take any note whatsoever of their resting heart rate, or what their heart rate is when they wake up in the morning? Okay. One of the cool things, like Garmin's or Fitbits or even Apple Watches and things like that now, there's a lot more ability to stay aware of really kind of where your heart rate is, what your resting heart rate is, what your maximum heart rate is. Okay, so I'm going to break down what a lot of that stuff is and what it's about and why it's important. Okay, Susan touched on it already quite a bit. The main thing is conversation pace. We've talked about that already a few weeks. You'll hear that all the way through week 12. You'll constantly hear it from the leaders. Conversation pace is really the best pace to work out at to gain aerobic endurance. Okay? So if you can carry on a conversation while you're exercising, whether it's walking, running, swimming, bicycling, whatever you're doing, if you're trying to have a conversation while you're walking or running, that's not a conversation, right? Okay? That is an indication that your heart rate has shot through the target heart rate zone, and you're actually closer up to that red line on your piece of paper. Okay? So everybody take a look at that sheet of your little heart rate slip right now.
If you didn't get it from the star card, you can go get it.
So as Susan mentions, the one side of it is 65%, goes up to 85%, and you see the red line towards the end, right? That's our target that we want to exercise in. How many have taken classes where they get the heart rate charts up on the wall, or, you know, a lot of classes really emphasize where you should be for that target zone. Same thing with what you're doing here with the walking and running, okay? So when you're at rest, your heart rate doesn't go down to 0, right? Because that would be like real rest. Like the rest of everything's over, okay? So resting heart rate for the average person tends to be high 50s to mid 70s, okay? Really, if you're super fit and have been for a long time, that resting heart rate may be down in the 40s, okay? But for the most part, 60 to 72 is what most physicians, most medical people kind of figures that's the standard. You want to be kind of between 60 and 72 beats a minute at rest. Okay, when you're sleeping, that might go a little bit lower. So that's as low as your heart rate gets. Okay, your maximum heart rate is based roughly on age. Okay, when you're 20 years old, pretty much your maximum heart rate is up in the 210, 215, 220. Okay, so your heart can just beat. As we age, that highest heart rate, your maximum heart rate, naturally starts dropping a little bit, okay, for all kinds of reasons. Susan mentioned the two conditions, okay, TOO, too much, too fast, okay, too hard. 2 is easy to get to, the 20200, because everybody can maintain a maximum heart rate for about 8 to 10 to 12 minutes. Okay, that's what's tricky. Your maximum heart rate isn't you hit that 180 or 170 or whatever your heart rate is, and then that's your last one. Okay, you hit max and it's over. No, you can maintain maximum for about 8 to 10 minutes. Okay, which is kind of how people get tricked into, I'm not working hard enough, I'm not working long enough, and they're overdoing it, but they don't think they're overdoing it because they can still kind of maintain what their effort is. Okay, is that a little confusing? So your maximum heart rate is something you can hold for 8 to 10 minutes, but that's 100%. You don't see 100% on those slips, all right? Because the target pretty much ends at about 85% when that red zone starts, okay? I'm doing if you guys have seen, a lot of you have seen this talk before. I'm kind of reversing things the way I'm explaining it tonight. So let's take that maximum heart rate, and your minimum heart rate is your resting heart rate. So that zone between total rest and maximum effort, that's where your heart can operate during exercise. As you get fitter, and you'll see this over the course of the 12 weeks, you're not going to go from rest to maximum super fast. Right now you might be, if you're not quite as fit. This is really kind of just getting into your first program, or you've been away from consistent aerobic exercise for a while. You may go from that resting or the 65% to 90% almost immediately, okay? What we want to do is get that down and get in that zone where you're staying closer to that 70 to 85%, staying in there, not blasting through the zone as quickly as possible, okay? As you get fitter, as you get more consistent, as your body builds more endurance, okay, those zones even though the numbers are like, I'll just say from 90 to 150, okay, so 60 beats. The same 60 beats are there, but the zones actually start broadening out. That makes sense? Okay? Because as you get fitter, it's going to take a little more effort to go from 70 to 80%. And even a little more effort than that to go from 80 to 85%. When you're not as fit, you're going to go from 60 to 80 like that. Okay? So one of the things I want everybody to keep an eye on over the next 12 weeks is just how that changes. Because it will change if you're consistent over the next 12 weeks. That it'll, wow, I got to put a little more into it to get up to those higher numbers. Where week 2, week 3, seemed like I went up to the top number, with hardly any effort at all. Okay. Let's go back to kind of the heart and how everything works. So, blood leaves the heart out through your arteries, okay, out to your working muscles. Muscle demand for blood, for oxygen, for nutrients increases with more exercise and more effort, okay? Blood goes out through the arteries, comes back through veins. And what you can build during aerobic exercise, during endurance type exercise, is the exchange points, okay? Blood goes out through the arteries, comes back through the veins. Everybody's got about the same amount of arteries, about the same amount of veins. What we can all build, though, is the capillary beds. So the exchange points, very, very microscopic, tiny little vessels that is where blood exchanges from the good, clean blood to the blood that needs to go back to the liver and the heart and the lungs and get kind of washed through and circulated through the body. Okay? So building capillaries is really what you want to do with aerobic exercise. Okay? Endurance-based exercise isn't fast. It isn't pumping iron as fast, as hard as you can. It isn't taking your muscles to fatigue. That's a different kind of training. Okay, taking your muscles to fatigue does work. It does make you fitter, but it's for shorter pieces of endurance or shorter pieces of power and strength. Okay, so any kind of class that you've taken over the years, where it's lots of weight or lots of strong effort for very short amounts of period, or for 2 or 3 repeats, and then take a long break, take a long rest. That's a completely different system of the body, where you're trying to actually build, you're straining muscle to build muscle. Okay? Aerobic endurance training is more long, slow distance. Okay? LSD, long, slow distance, not the other LSD. And what that does is that's really what burns the calories. That's what burns off the excess fat. There's only so much storage that we all have in our muscles of glycogen, the glucose, the sugar, the muscles that are the muscle sugar that actually lets our body function. Okay? There's enough storage in working muscles for about 80, 90 minutes. You can get yourself trained up to about 2 hours, but then you run out of gas. Okay? Unless you're doing a lot of the aerobic type work, taking your time, going slower, all right, building that endurance, building a better capillary system, basically building a better circulatory plumbing system, okay? That helps bump your endurance and bump your ability to be out there longer, burn more calories, and get fitter aerobically, okay? If you can lay a base, and there's been lots and lots of studies, we just had the world championships down in Eugene here last month, okay? The basic training that almost all endurance athletes use is building a long base, building a solid base, building that base of aerobic capacity, okay? Getting your heart, getting your lungs, getting your body and that circulatory system to adapt to a lot of work, okay? If you can do a lot of easy, comfortable, conversation pace type work, that builds the bottom part of the training pyramid, okay? That really gives you a great base. And from there, then you start adding the strength work. Then you start adding the weight work. Then you start adding things that tone the muscles up, that make you stronger. But without a base, think of it like, like a pyramid. If the base of the pyramid is broad and wide and thick, then the peak can be higher, okay? But if it's just a narrow, like, very, very small base, and you try and peak really high, timber, okay? It all falls over because there's just not enough base work there set up. And that's what Susan's clinic does such a great job of. 12 weeks of building, 12 weeks of adapting to more endurance, okay? A word that Susan likes to say a lot, okay? Consistency. Consistency is the big deal when it comes to aerobic strength, aerobic endurance, building a better capillary, building a better flowing system, okay? If you're going from like 0, not doing much, that takes a good 12 to 16 weeks to really start making a difference. During the course of those 12 weeks, as I was referencing before, you're not going to shoot through those training zones as fast. It's going to take a little bit more time, a little bit more effort to move from 70% to 80% to 90%. Okay, that'll be one thing that changes. The other thing that changes is that resting heart rate. Okay, you will start seeing your resting heart rate drop down a little bit. Okay, maybe up to 6 to 8 beats. So instead of being at like 60, in the mid 60s, 64, 66 for a resting heart rate, you might see it drop down to the high 50s, okay, over the course of 12 to 16 weeks. Because it's taking less effort for your heart to move through that circulatory system because you've built more ways for that blood and oxygen to exchange, okay? The next part, as you start burning more calories, burning more body fat off, you start seeing the toning in the muscles. That next stage is actual musculoskeletal development. That takes another 12 to 16 weeks. Okay, so the women's clinic, the Princess Steps get you through that first base building part. Okay, and then the consistency from that starts building and toning muscles. All right, and you'll start seeing more endurance. We've had a lot of women who've gone through the clinic that they finish up and then somebody says, "Hey, we're going to go hike South Sister, or we're going to go do the 10 Falls Trail out of Silver Falls," and maybe a year or two prior to doing the clinic, well, that's a lot of effort. That's going to take a lot of time. Okay, but getting through the women's clinic, getting through Princess Steps, doing the 12 weeks, building up that aerobic endurance, all of a sudden something like that doesn't seem as impossible, because that's where the strength starts building up. And hiking up behind the falls over at Silver Falls or something like that, you can adapt to that elevation change a whole lot quicker because you've got this better endurance system and a better base to work from. Okay. Talked about that. We're going in a different order today, so it's gotta make sure I'm saying this. Any questions? Yes.
How does the heat affect heart rate?
Excellent question. Heat affects heart rate a lot, because a couple different things. It's hot when you go outside, but right now we're all sitting, and I turned down the air conditioning, so it's only about 68 degrees in there right now. Okay, so it's nice and cool. Air conditioning draws water out of the air, draws water out of your body. Okay, so if you're sitting in an air-conditioned house all day, or a conditioned office all day, or an air-conditioned store, and then you go out into the heat, your heart rate's going to go up immediately. Okay, and it's going to take less effort to get up into that super high zone. Okay, the other thing is most people, when it's hotter like this, we don't live in Arizona or New Mexico or something like that. We're not used to this nearly 100-degree type heat. So our bodies can't adapt right away to it. So there is an adaptation that takes place. Dehydration is always there because the air is dehydrating you, and you're sweating so much to stay cool. That's going to affect how you're exercising. You're not going to be able to put out as much effort, and your heart rate's going to rise immediately. Okay, so be aware of that tonight and any of the upcoming weeks where it's still going to be warm.
Medicine also is going to increase your heart rate.
Okay, I'll get to that.
Okay.
I just want to stay on the weather thing for a second. When it's 60 to 70 degrees, unbelievable effort. I mean, easy to work out. Okay, most people that are doing half marathons and marathons, they love it when it's 48 degrees. Okay, because as your body isn't heating up, it's not using a lot more blood and oxygen to cool yourself down. So, the ambient temperature really for running and walking endurance type activities, if it's between 50 and 60, boy, that's going to be a good day, a good session. Okay. Once it gets a little colder, then you got to bundle up a little bit more. Once it gets a little warmer, then dehydration and higher heart rates. So yeah, I got a list of the things. So things that will change your heart rate. Okay. Anybody been stressed out at all the last couple of years? Been kind of a normal couple of years, right? Stress definitely increases your heart rate. Okay. Medications. There's a lot of medications that depress heart rate. Okay, like beta blockers, things like that. So if you're on some medication and you're regularly seeing your doctor, your physician's assistant, PA, stay in touch with them. Make sure that he or she knows what you're doing, that you're doing this program. It may even be a great thing to just, if you do have a Garmin or Fitbit or one of those kinds of devices, keep track, because you're going to see a big difference. And then you can go into the doctor's office and go, hey, look what I've been doing. Okay, things are changing, and usually, medical people tend to be really excited about that and excited for you. And sometimes it changes medications if that's a goal. On a different piece of paper. Elevation. Okay, going up hills, going up steps. That's going to definitely affect. Starting at a higher altitude. Okay, we're all down here in the valley, 300, 400, 500 feet. Head up to Bend or higher than that, you definitely notice it's a little harder to breathe. Okay, your heart rate's going to be a little bit higher. So elevation, altitude, and then steepness of something, obviously. Okay, you go up a steep hill, go up a steep set of stairs, your heart rate's going to rise just because of that additional effort. On the flip side, going downhill, a whole lot easier. Heart rate doesn't have to be as high. It takes less effort to go downhill. Wind. You got wind in your face, it's going to make it harder. Your heart rate's going to go up a little bit. Okay, the wind's at your back, and it's a nice cool day. It's in that 50 to 60 degree range like I was talking about. Things are going to be a whole lot easier. The heart rate's going to be a little bit less because there's not going to be as much effort. Okay. Dehydration I mentioned, that's going to make a difference. Okay, and this time of year, it's kind of hard not to be completely hydrated all the time.
You're doing great. I'm just looking.
You're hedging over here.
Because the clock says.
Okay. Any other questions? That was a good question on that. Any others?
But age.
With age and then another one?
Yeah. I was here a few years ago and I noticed my numbers are different.
Yes, I'm older.
Okay. What we do, the formula we use is kind of what's been, medically,
Industry standard.
yeah,
For most people.
medically accepted.
I appreciate this. So
Yeah.
if this means it gets better with age, I'm good, right?
Yeah. So you take the formula is 220. You take the number 220 and subtract your age. Okay. So if you're 50, 220 minus 50, 170 is pretty much what that maximum number is going to be. Okay. If you're younger than 50, older than 50, do the math. They'll just stay at 50 for ease of calculation. Do you lose a beat every year of your life? Theoretically, yeah. I mean, theoretically, that's how it works. It doesn't necessarily have to. You don't lose a beat. It's like, where'd that beat go? Okay. But there is a difference between, a 25-year-old and a 60-year-old. Your heart rate just doesn't get as high. And there is a whole lot of reasons, as I mentioned before. Partially it's muscle structure, partially it's bone density. There's just a whole lot of different things that affect that maximum heart rate.
Yeah, and I am going to interject here. I'm 60. I can't do what I did when I was even 40, let alone 25. But part of this whole thing is we're going to celebrate today. We're going to celebrate where we're at today. That we're here and we're able to be upright and left, right, repeat, go forward, and we have goals and we have the camaraderie and the accountability, because it's all too easy to try and compare where we were 10 years ago, where we were 20 years ago, and dig ourselves a hole. I got a shovel, let anybody. I've been there. It's really hard when you're comparing yourself with where you used to be and not honoring and celebrating where you're at today, and then working and building on that. And that's part of probably one of the chapters in my book, huh? Honor where we're at today and be honest with ourselves. And as I have said this before, some of you have heard me say this, I'll say it, I think it's relevant right now. Every day I tell myself, Susan, leave your ego at the door. And so, good job, John. That was awesome. There was another question. Don't go, because you had another question.
So what about heart rate ranges that are provided by like Garmin? Is that more tailored? If that's different from those, or should we lean towards those?
Yeah, well, that is a super question. So, Garmin's got a lot of calculations taking place. Fitbit as well, but honestly, Garmin's kind of a little bit better, more accurate. It is taking into effect over the course of wearing a device like this for a lot of months. It takes into effect what how your body's reacting to different kinds of exercise. It takes into account what your sleep is like.
And recovery too.
Just in the last 5-6 years, what these things do, it's amazing. Personal thing on that, before the store opened, between 1994 and 1996, the original polar heart rate monitors that came out. We did an awful lot of training. We had a lot of training groups before we opened the store, and we used polar heart rate monitors, in our training to make sure that people were kind of staying in that zone, so that the strap around you and those things were so rudimentary, and if you ran under like high tension wires, they wouldn't work. And, I mean, it was, or if there was a track that we used to run at that there were, high tension wires next to the track. Well, the polar heart rate monitors wouldn't work because there was too much interference. What has happened now with the technology is just unbelievable. And really just in the last 5 years, how the technology has really moved. It's fun to look at this every morning and see, wow, how did I sleep last night?
I'm gonna add another bit of subjectivity. So there's a lot of objectivity. The heart rate's not gonna lie. I mean, it's really good also at wrist-based. A lot of them, there's no longer this. I mean, you can still get it, but all the Garmin's are wrist-based. That's why we talk a lot about effort. How are you feeling? Regardless of what your Garmin says or what you're trying to manually take your heart rate tonight, 3 times, by the way, leaders, how do you feel? And so what you want to do, regardless of what it's telling you, if it's during the warm-up part, does it feel effort-wise? Does it feel easy? Because it should. And in the middle part, after you've done the warm-up, does it still feel comfortable? Like, yeah, I'm sweating. Yeah, I'm breathing a little harder, but I can still talk. It's still reasonably comfortable. Versus, man, I feel like yuck. And yeah, whether it's, heat, whether it's stress, whether it's didn't get enough sleep, whether it's dehydration, whether it's just not fit, really honor how you feel. And that's why we say easy, comfortable, easy. So what we're doing with this heart rate truly is putting some objectivity and science into it. So I don't know if that answers your question about how does Garmin do it differently than this formula.
This formula is 15 years ago what the standard was, because there weren't devices that you could just buy that could tell you all these great things about your body.
Some people have a bigger heart, some people have a smaller heart. Some people are what we call chronically fit. Grew up on a farm, 11th out of 15 kids. This is all I've ever known. That's a true story. So, we're kind of in that chronically fit stage where, the 220 minus your age tells me 136 is my top. 136 is not my top. I can be at conversation pace a lot higher than 136. So I don't go by that formula. Okay, but I do go by how I feel. If I'm feeling like yuck, it's like, man, I can't breathe today. I'm going to slow down regardless of what that says. And I could throw the watch away and go by effort. But that's years and years and years and years of paying attention to that. And that's one of the things we encourage you to do. Learn to, and I said this is word for word in the update for whoever read it. Learn to associate those numbers with how you feel. And practice that. And after a while, you won't have to worry about that anymore. You're gonna more confidently know, hey, I'm supposed to feel easy, I feel easy. Or I'm supposed to feel comfortable right now and I feel like crap. Pay attention to that. So I hope that helps a little bit. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, John. gone a little bit overboard. Sorry about that, but you know, sometimes we do that because it's important. So we're going to sign off to you guys out there in the World Wide Web, and have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Finish.